Thank you all for standing by, and welcome to today's webinar, Vault Multi-Factor Authentication with Cisco Duo. My name is Karen Hui, Senior Partner Marketing Manager with HashiCorp, and I'll be helping to facilitate today's webinar. Feel free to type your questions during the webinar. This webinar is recorded, and the recording will be made available after post-processing, usually within 2 days. Our speakers today are Talha Tariq, Chief Security Officer, HashiCorp, and Wolfgang Goerlich, Advisory CISO, Geosecurity, Cisco. They'll be talking about why HashiCorp made MFA available for free across the Vault stack and trends that are increasing the need to institute secure access broadly across the organization. We'll also see a demo of establishing MFA in your HCP Vault instance from our Technical Product Marketing Manager, Justin Weissig. You'll see a short bio of our speakers on the next screen. Talha is the Chief Security Officer at HashiCorp. He has 20 years of experience building and scaling security programs from startups to Fortune 100 organizations. Prior to HashiCorp, Talha has served as CISO, Anki, and Financial Force, and has held various security leadership positions at Microsoft and at PwC. He has also led a variety of engagements around the world, advising clients across a range of industries on matters related to significant sensitive data breaches, intellectual property thefts, forensic investigations, security program development, and cloud security operations. I'm also pleased to welcome Wolfgang Goerlich. He's an advisory CISO for Cisco Secure. Prior to this role, he led IT and IT security in the healthcare and financial services verticals. Wolfgang has held VP positions at several consulting firms leading advisory and assessment practices. He's an active part of the security community, co-founding and organizing security conferences and events. Wolfgang regularly advises and presents on the topics of security, architecture and design, identity and access management, data governance, secure development lifecycles, zero trust security, and more. And now let's get started with Talha as he runs through our agenda.
Thank you, Karen. Warm welcome from HashiCorp and Cisco Duo to all the attendees. Lovely day here in San Francisco. We plan to cover a bunch of things and make this topic and webinar conversational and interactive. Please, as Karen mentioned, feel free to ask questions along the way. We'll catalog those questions and try to answer them towards the end. In terms of agenda, we will mostly be talking through just our collective view on zero trust approaches, some industry trends and nuggets. We'll give a little bit brief overview on Vault and how Vault works, given we'll be talking a bit about some of the cool MFA features that we just recently launched. I'll have Wolfgang and the team cover a little bit of context from Cisco Duo, and we'll have a demo towards the end around how Cisco and Duo work together in providing better security and authentication to our customers. That's the agenda. With that, I'll move to just a little bit context on HashiCorp. We basically, some logos on the right you may be familiar with. We started building a lot of open source projects, which are pretty popular in the DevOps and practitioner community. Last year, we had about hundreds of millions of downloads of our OSS projects alone. Some of these are available as commercial offerings, but our core thesis is helping practitioners and our customers automate workflows around cloud operation models. That's our core thesis. We basically operate around 3 sets of constituents: our practitioners, customers, and ecosystem of partners. Practitioners being individuals, developers, operators who use our products, customers who use paid version of our products, and then a huge ecosystem of partners and integration, Cisco being one of our strategic partners around identity. That's what HashiCorp does. Cool. I think the background on some of the discussion is, if you look what's happening in the world of infrastructure, each decade had its own way of looking at how the stacks are developed, but more and more with cloud adoption, you're seeing this mega trend move from on-prem to cloud, from breaking away these siloed perimeter-based approaches of conventional data centers to moving your cloud applications, networking, compute and storage to more and more elastic cloud. And that's just a shift to move from like static on-prem data centers to cloud. And that's the whole premise behind some of the context that we'll be talking about. Multi-cloud is just a reality. If you look at any large company, what we mean by multi-cloud is not just you're using multiple cloud vendors, but also your move from on-prem to cloud is not a binary switch. You typically, as companies start migrating towards cloud, they'll still have plenty of application and infrastructure which is on-prem. Could be your VMware stack, your mainframes, your own self-managed data center, OpenStack, what have you. And on cloud, it's a combination of different services from different cloud providers. Some standardize on AWS, some pick up GCP, Alibaba, Azure, what have you. But multi-cloud is just a pretty big reality that we live in today's day in infrastructure. Multi-cloud also brings a bunch of interesting challenges. We talked about a little bit of the different layers as how we see the cloud operating model. First one being cloud provisioning, on how cloud governance and adoption takes place in many companies. And in pretty much every security and cloud operations program, identity is just the core. It's the core suite of security services, the core suite of how do you build, design, operate a scalable infrastructure program. And then just your attack surface expands and increases, since now you're moving from a static to more of a dynamic, elastic world. And a lot of your conventional security protections don't apply directly to cloud. So case an example, in the data center concept, you basically have this concept of zones and boundaries, and different companies operate with the model of everything inside the data center is trusted, everything outside the data center is untrusted. With cloud, that mode just changes. Everything is revolved around identity. Your developers can just write one line of code and change access permissions to your S3 bucket, and next thing you know, the world can see what data you have stored there. So just the attack surface and security challenges are different from cloud to on-prem world. I'll pass on some of the context to Wolfgang to talk a little bit about his view on zero trust and identity.
Yeah, thank you so much. And that's a really good setup, right? Because as we know, this move to cloud this past 10, 15 years has meant we're constantly bootstrapping technology, right? We've got this old engine and we add some new technology to it, and then we shift a little bit, but we never seem to really get past these layers and layers and stacks of technology. I know that we may have things in the cloud that are brand new operating at DevOps scale, and at the same time we may have, you know, mainframes and other legacy systems we need to support. You know, as a advisory CISO with dual security, now part of Cisco Secure, one of the things we're constantly looking at is how do we provide trusted access into that tech stack, whether it's on-prem or whether it's in the cloud. How do we provide a consistent set of policy enforcement, regardless of where the access request is coming from and regardless of where it's going to? And of course, near and dear to the conversation we're going to have today, how do we do that for our privileged users, our admin users, our most important, you know, the folks who have the greatest level of access, the folks who can execute those commands and make what should have been private now very, very public. Of course, the way that the industry has chosen to address this problem is with zero trust. So very broadly, the tenets of zero trust are pretty simple. I've got a a strongly authenticated user, and we're going to be talking predominantly about privileged users in this conversation. I've got a strongly authenticated user on a known strongly authenticated device, communicating across an encrypted channel, assuming the network could be compromised or untrusted, going through a policy engine to get to a resource. That's the predominant security model. And when we use that model, what that means is, because of the way that we're enforcing policy, effectively, we've got a couple of downstream benefits. First one being that the access control point, right, where we're making that access decision becomes our perimeter. So we may not be able to wrap a perimeter around the 1,000 SaaS apps we have if we were to think about old school, ship out a firewall to every cloud vendor and every SaaS app we're working. That's not going to scale. It doesn't make any sense. But we can move it up a layer and wrap a perimeter at the access control decision where we can make some good informed policy choices. Second point of that is, so of course that reduces our attack surface, gives us better control. The second point of that is, because we do have that visibility at every connection, at every session, we can also see what devices people are coming from, the context and conditions of their requests, and really expand into that session to see what is going on and determine whether or not we should extend trust, whether or not we should extend the trust boundary. So I'm pretty pleased in general with Zero Trust. And Talha, I don't know if that, coincides with what you're seeing at Hashi, if there's more around Zero Trust that I should have added there.
Yeah, no, great context. And it's a pretty similar story, what we see not just at HashiCorp, but also a lot of our customers, where the focus and our core thesis is move more towards authenticating and authorizing everything, whether it's your application, whether it's your device, whether it's your user, have context on who needs to get access on what. And later in the slide, we're going to talk a little bit about various pillars of identity and Zero Trust, how we perceive them to be. Cool. I'll move forward towards some industry trends, and Wolfgang, want to cover a bit of what you're seeing in the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So the pillar to that is identity, right? We want to, like you're saying, authenticate and authorize everywhere, dynamically based on policy decisions. Now, when we talk about strong authentication, of course, that means multi-factor. We've seen a great increase in an uptick in multi-factor in recent years, which is fantastic. When you look at some of the trends about, incidents being caused by stolen credentials or by phish credentials, we've seen those trends ongoing for a number of years in industry reports like the Verizon Data Breach Report. And so the application of multi-factor reduces the risk of that, of course, because if the credit gets stolen and compromised, we've got another factor we can rely on. Now, we've also seen a shift towards adopting lower friction factors, be that push, be that what's going on with WebAuthn and FIDO2, that move towards passwordless, where we don't even need to worry about the primary credential. And along with that, and near and dear to my heart when I think about the privileged users and the privileged access workstations that they're using, we're seeing more folks who are using the device posture, right? What can I know about that device? Is it a device I trust? Is it an up-to-date device? We're seeing more folks who are applying that policy. So you see that last stat that demonstrates, around a third of authentication failures were due to outdated devices. Obviously, we'd want that. It's interesting that the stat's getting bigger, and I'm saying that's a good thing, but I say it's a good thing because more people are relying on that as one of the signals. Yeah,
that's so true, Wolfgang. Thanks for that context. I was reading through the Verizon Data Breach Report myself, the latest version that came out, and the most interesting stat related to this was, in the data they've captured, more than 50% of the incidents were because of credential compromise in some shape or fashion. And that's anything from API tokens to usernames and passwords or TLS certificates or what have you. So definitely a big attack vector that a lot of companies are interested to solve for in cloud context.
Yeah, so when we look at that, we're looking at it a couple of different ways, right? First, let's address that credential compromise. So we're establishing trust with a strong authentication. And second, once they're connected, let's think about what the adversary is going to do. Unfortunately, as we all know, if we solve for credential compromise tomorrow, cybercrime, the momentum behind it and the money behind it dictates that they're not just going to like pack up and go home, right? It's not like they're all going to like, ah, well, you got me, I'm done. They're going to move for other vectors, and those vectors oftentimes are unpatched vulnerabilities. So we combine these things together to address the primary risk and the secondary risk, and continuously verifying that trust.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I think I mentioned this in the earlier slide, and just to give a little bit of context on how HashiCorp views zero trust. Basically, the heart of transition you're talking about is just moving away from this static model to more of a dynamic cloud model, and just focusing on strong identity, strong authentication, strong authorization across each and every layer, whether it's application, user, device, or network. And the way I try to divide the world is in like 4 different buckets. One, starting from the right-hand side, is the notion of establishing human identity. A lot of folks are familiar with this in your workplace environment. It could be anything like your LDAP or Active Directory or Cisco Duo or Okta, what have you. Your human records are coming in from someplace. If you apply the same concept, which is the box on the left, that is machine identities, and that's basically applying the same concept. Doesn't matter if your application is cloud native or something on-prem. Each application has a notion of identity, and Vault provides a consistent approach to identity. And then you have these 2 things in between. The second pillar here is, how do these machines talk to each other? How do bots and different applications talk to each other? Like your web server needs to talk to your database, your analytics application needs to talk to the warehouse, and how to define this authentication and authorization between machine to machine access. And then finally, how do humans get access to machines in a secure manner? And all the things that Wolfgang talked about, having context on the device, having context on application and user and the policy. And that's really useful to apply all these principles of least privilege and strong identity and just-in-time access across all these layers. Wolfgang, did you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I would just say that, you know, the NIST has got their principles of zero trust. UK NCSC also has their principles. One of the things I like about the UK NCSC principles is they specifically call out, it isn't just the human identity, right? We focus a lot on human identity for a good reason. Back to, that's one of the ways that things get compromised, and you know, that's one of the most straightforward use cases. But it also has to be the service identity. It also has to be the machine identities. So I like the fact that, as you lay it out here, that we're covering those different use cases and thinking about everything from machine to machine to human to machine. I think that makes a ton of sense. And applying those zero trust principles of a strong authentication, a dynamic authentication authorization model, you know, applied policy across all those layers is really where you're going to get a good set of controls and get a good set of visibility.
That's great.
So specifically on the human to machine side, right? The first steps of that, and we'll dig into this a little bit deeper as we go through, but it starts with that multi-factor. And again, that could be a standard factor, that could be a token, that could be a push. There's a lot of different ways to do that. We're seeing more of an uptick, as I mentioned, in the trends towards passwordless. And then the next step of that is verifying that device and really restricting what devices are available to get to which apps. And that device restriction, we think about attack surface restriction, is really a critical component.
Yeah, sorry, I accidentally clicked the next slide. But yeah, good context.
Go for it.
Yeah, I think we talked a bit about notions of strong identity and access, and I think folks who are close in the space know the importance of multi-factor authentication. That's moving away from just something like a password, which is static, and if it's reused or compromised, provides attackers ability to access, to provide much more stronger controls, and including another factor along with something to something you have. And MFA can take various shapes or forms. And in some places it's biometrics, in some places you could enable something like a TOTP app, a hardware token, an SMS code. Implementations can vary, but this is something as a feature we care deeply about, and also something that's available in all of our products. And just wanted to highlight a growing trend where MFA and strong authentication is becoming a de facto standard in many regulatory compliance frameworks as well. Just carrying on that thought, I think one of the things that HashiCorp is close to, since we have a ton of practitioner community using open source products, we have commercial customers who are using our managed or enterprise offerings. One of the things we've been pushing for and working towards is having the baseline security controls available in all of our products. And the big thing I want to highlight here is we moved our MFA feature set in our open source vault as well, just to make sure our practitioner community, folks who are using even our open source products, can leverage the same strong feature set of MFA, whether or not they're using enterprise apps or not. And as I mentioned, the MFA types can take various shapes. You could do that with something like Duo, in simple cases, something like an SMS, YubiKey, what have you. But we support all major MFA types, and that's available across all of our product suites. Cool. I think it's worth just highlighting a little bit context on what Vault does. At the heart of it, it's basically a secrets management solution, provides secrets management capabilities, whether you're storing credentials or certificates or passwords or API tokens or whatnot. And there are basically few different, it's pretty modular, and there are a few different ways of how we enable the ecosystem and pitch this as a platform. I think first is what we call the auth backends, and these allow Vault to use applications to authenticate from different systems. As an example, you may be bootstrapping like an EC2 VM that's authenticating to a different application, maybe using AWS auth plugin. And basically, it's the goal is for us to be able to support identity constructs from any of these downstream systems. So that's something we enable as an ecosystem. The second big thing here is what we call auditing backend. Just we want to capture and keep a trail of exactly who has done what, and then enable our customers to feed this to some SIM or monitoring solution or what have you. Then we have the storage backends, and this is where Vault actually stores its own data, example secrets. Could be anything like a relational DB, MySQL, Postgres, or if you want to use some cloud DB like Google Spanner. The intent here is to be able to provide modular capability depending on the customer, so something they can do which is durable and highly available. And the last piece I want to mention is this bucket on the right, which is what we call secret backends. And this is actually how Vault actually provides secrets. And the context here is for us to enable dynamic secret capability. We talked about, a simple example could be just having a key value store like username and passwords. In a more complex scenario, you could have database plugins like MySQL or Postgres. So what Vault provides ability to do is, rather than having static credentials flow everywhere, you can have just-in-time short-term temporal credentials that Vault can manage for you, whereas providing you capabilities to reduce risk, providing strong authentication and auditing across all of your applications. I'm going to pass on to Wolfgang to talk a little bit about enforcing access policies.
All right, so with that as context, we've got a privileged user who needs to access Vault. Maybe they're establishing a new service account that Vault's going to manage. Maybe we're checking out a credential. Perhaps we need to get a secret to go ahead and configure SSO, whatever the case may be. Now, one of the things I really am excited about is the fact that, like you mentioned, Talha, that now MFA is in the base OS version, because as part of dual security, we've long talked about democratizing security. How can we increase security and reduce the barriers to accessing some of these strong features? So it starts off with that, right? We want to do multi-factor and make sure that that person accessing the Vault is indeed the person they say they are. Step one, basic, fundamental security property, which is now available. Now, what happens if that person is on a compromised device, or what happens if that person is not on a personal device, a device that they're not supposed to use, right? Many organizations, of course, have adopted the PAW, or Privileged Access Workstation, or SAW, Secure Access Workstation, depending on your nomenclature. This idea of an admin workstation that should be used on the control plane, that should be used for privileged tasks. Now, that workstation model varies, right? Some folks actually have a dedicated device they carry around. That always surprises me. I mean, do you want to have two laptops? But some people do. I was working with an organization, and they rolled out vaulting with a PAW, and one of the ways that they got their admins on board was they gave everyone like this neon gaming laptop. Everyone was very excited about it. It looked pretty cool. I got to admit, it looked pretty cool. Put on some hacker stickers, you're ready. Other folks will want to run a virtual machine on their day-to-day desktop for that privileged access workstations. And of course, some folks would do a PAW in a full VDI environment. So whatever the model, a dedicated machine, a local virtual machine, a VDI model, I'm an admin and I'm going to access the Vault. First thing, we're going to make sure that really is me. MFA, strong credentials. Great, I'm in. Now, before, how do I really know I'm on that PAW? How do I really know I'm not on a BYOD device? How do I really know that, I wasn't on my way downstairs and I stopped off in my kid's room to do an admin task really quickly? The way that you do that with products like Dual Security is you use access policies. So in this example, we'd have an access policy that makes sure that this is a known device, right? Make sure that this is a managed device and a trusted device before it accesses the Vault. In addition to that, we can wrap around some additional policies. But first off, is it the person? Is it the device? These are the two main ingredients that go into Zero Trust, and we run that through a policy engine to make a decision. If you take me to the next slide, please. So we'll see in a minute what that looks like from a demo perspective, but one of the things I want to point out is from the admin perspective, from the user who's accessing the Vault perspective, all this is transparent. All the checks that I just mentioned and all the analysis I'm going to mention in the next slide is transparent to the person. It looks just like they were multi-factoring in. I think that's important for a variety of different reasons, right? I like to say when work looks like work gets done. If it's something consistent and familiar, people are more likely to accept it and run it. But behind the scenes, we're checking the device, we're checking a couple different things. So Talha, if you take me to that next slide. So first off, strong authentication, yes. Second off, is it a known device? Yes. Now, behind the scenes, we can check a few different things as well. Does that device still meet policy? Is it patched? Is it free from malware, right? Has an adversary somehow phished the user and got malware on the box and has command and control going on in their session? Happens as we know, not as often as phish credentials, but definitely happens, as we know. So we can check for those sort of things before we gain access to the vault. Once we've got that session going, once someone is connected and is working in the vault, we also can look at trust continuously. So evaluating if anything changes during that session. And that could be things like the session gets compromised, it gets, man in the middle, those sort of things. We can also look at any other indicators that perhaps the user isn't behaving like they should. So in conjunction with that initial check, we can also do ongoing monitoring to make sure that the privileged admin is still in a trusted state as they're interacting with the vault.
That's great. We do have one cool little demo, and Justin from our Vault team is also on this webinar. So I'm going to pass on to our colleague Justin to give us a little bit of overview and a demo of how an auth flow with Duo and Vault works together. Over to you, Justin.
Perfect. Thanks very much. Just going to share my screen. One sec here. All right. So, yeah, thanks very much for talking through the workflow and the slides and the high level, topics. So what I wanted to do today was, basically walk through how to set this actually up. So, we're going to set up a HCP Vault instance, which is basically HashiCorp Vault, which is running on a managed service. I will sort of say, this works pretty much anywhere, as that one slide mentions, whether you're an open source user or whether you're running that enterprise version, on-prem, or if you choose to use HCP Vault, same workflow across all three different versions. I just started off with a doc, so if you wanted to Google it or something, you just type HashiCorp Vault login MFA, and you'll come to this page. We support a few different types, as was mentioned in one of those slides. Obviously, today we're going to be talking about this one, Duo. And so what we're going to do, we're going to have the use case of, say I'm a user and I wanted to log into the HCP Vault instance. Hey, typically you just use a username and password, but we want a little bit more secure session. So we're going to establish MFA or multi-factor authentication. So I'll just talk about HCP Vault for a second. So HCP Vault allows you to run a managed instance of Vault. So, you don't necessarily have to have the, ops overhead of running it yourself. We have a few different versions. You can run Terraform, you can run Console, but today we're going to check out Vault. You can sign up for free. I think new accounts get enough credits that you can run Vault for about a month and sort of play around with it, so you don't have to worry about it. Here's what the console looks like. So, obviously I already have an account. I just logged in, and this is the default page. You can run Console, Packer, Vault, Boundary, Terraform. Today we're just going to focus on Vault. So I already have a Vault cluster running. It's running 1.10. I'll log in here, and gives you sort of a default splash page. Actually, one sec, I want to show you what creating a cluster looks like. So if you wanted to create a new cluster, you just give it a name, you select the tier that you want. We have a bunch of different sizes depending on your workload, all the way up to big workloads. Say you wanted a replicated cluster from, say, US West to US East in AWS, we can do that. Pick the network you want, and then basically click create. So I already have a cluster, so I'll just show you that one. So I'll just go down here. In here, my cluster's up, it's stable. I'm running 1.10. It's a highly available cluster. The things that we're interested in are over here. I want to get the cluster URLs. So typically how HCP Vault works is we have public or typically by default, all the production clusters are private. So we create the Vault cluster, it goes into an AWS VPC that isn't accessible from the internet. And then typically how you'd wire this up is, you'd establish peering between, your networks on AWS and, the HCP Vault instance. However, that can be a bit cumbersome if you want to do some development or you want to play around a bit. So we have an option to, turn on a publicly routable address. So for this cluster, I've done that, and I'm going to use that today. So I'm going to copy this public address. Also, we can generate a token. So for the first time you log into Vault, you'll need to generate a token. So I'm going to copy the public address, and then I'm going to go generate a token. Basically what this is a root token so that I can log in and sort of configure the instance. So, when I'm setting up the MFA plugin here, obviously I need access to Vault to do that. So I think we're good now. Yeah, so we got the public address, got our token. I think we're all set. I'll copy those values. Next thing I wanted to talk about was, okay, so we've have our HCP Vault cluster set up. Now we need to set up Duo. So what I've done is, I've just signed up for a free account during this demo. So, if you wanted to replicate the demo, you could do the same thing. You can just go up to the free trial button here, click that, and away you go. I'm not going to, I won't go through the workflow, but I've already done that behind the scenes. It was just, enter your email, that kind of stuff. So once you log in, you'll see a dashboard that looks like this. You can see I'm using the 30-day free trial. I'll go over to applications here on the left-hand menu. And basically, this is how you wire up, applications that you want to, have MFA or, two-factor authentication, basically applications that you want to secure. In this case, we want to secure HCP Vault. So I'm going to protect an application. And then there's a long list of applications in here that you can wire up with Duo. For our use case, I'm going to use this auth API. So I'm going to click over to protect here. And then it gives us some details. So it gives us, an integration key, a secret key, and an API host. These are all values that I need to copy down, and we're going to use in the next step. So I'll just copy these here. Yep. Yeah. I have an editor in the background that I'm just doing this. So now on the console, what I want to do is we're going to establish connectivity with Vault. So I'm going to, I'll just show you the Vault version I'm running in a second here. And then we're going to go and, connect with Vault without setting up any multi-factor authentication. Then we'll set up multi-factor authentication, and then we'll try to log in, and we'll see if we get prompted to, enter an MFA code. So I'll just run Vault version, running 1.10. This matches up with the version that I'm running over on HCP Vault. I'm going to put the Vault namespace. I'm going to enter that public address for Vault, and then I'm going to give that token. This is basically so I can connect to Vault. So I'm just going to run Vault status, and this will prove that, hey, what, I'm actually connected to HCP Vault. Everything's good. Again, these values, if you're trying to follow along, you just go over to the HCP console down here. And then I grab the address from here, and then I generated the token there. Cool. So let's move on to the next step. Right here, we're going to enable. So initially, when we logged into Vault, we used the root token. So, as was mentioned earlier in the webinar, we have a bunch of different, auth engines and secret engines that you can sort of interact with Vault and have Vault interact with external systems. So I'm going to enable an auth engine called UserPass. This basically allows people to, connect into Vault using usernames and passwords. typically you'd use an LDAP directory, or you might use a cloud platform if you're a human interacting with it. But you can use user pass, and it works good in a demo if you want to try to set this up on your own. So I'm going to create a user called Justin, and then I got a secure password here. I'm going to pop that in, and then I'm going to run vault auth list. What this does is basically, it sort of gives me the underlying, ID of that authentication method called user pass. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this value, and then I'm going to, when we configure Duo, I'm going to basically wire it up. So here's the next command, and I'll sort of walk through it. Basically, when we're configuring Duo, I want to say, hey, you know what? Anyone that connects to Vault using this auth method, I want to trigger a MFA, interaction. So in this one, I'm configuring Vault. I'm saying, hey, you know what? I want to enable MFA using this method of Duo. I'm saying anyone coming in on, this user password authentication method. And then here's my, integration key, secret key, and then API host. I grabbed these over from the console over here when we copied those down. All right, so I'll execute this. Good. And then, so what happened is we get, a method ID back from Vault. That's sort of that UID looking number down at the bottom there. In this next step, we're going to basically wire up the final piece of config that we need. So I'm just going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it here. So, we're basically telling Vault, hey, you know what? Anyone who logs into Vault, I would sort of want to enforce a MFA interaction or a prompt. So I'm giving it that, the method ID of Duo, and then I'm saying anyone connecting with that auth method, I want to come in on it. So if you want to copy, if you wanted to do that, you just basically need to replace these two values here. That's from Duo, and then the auth method from up there. All right, I think that makes sense. Hopefully everyone's following. So I'll run this one. Okay, I think we're good to go now. So everything's all wired up. We have HCP Vault running. We have Duo set up. And then we have Vault configured to say, hey, anyone that connects using this username and password, this Justin, and then this, password up here, hey, we want to issue an MFA prompt. However, as you'll see in a second, this isn't going to work the first time, and we'll sort of walk through why that is. So let me run it here. Oh yeah, sorry. I did want to mention one thing. So, if you're just running this on the open source version, you don't have to enter this namespace Vault thing. This is something HCP specific, because the HCP version of Vault is running the enterprise version, has something, a concept of namespaces, which sort of allows you to carve up different areas of Vault. And I just wanted to highlight that, I'm running in the Vault namespace called admin. And, I run Vault login just using the username and password. And I got my username and then password. All right, I think we're good. So I'll run that. All right, perfect. So we got our error back. This is actually a good error. So you can see, hey, there was a prompt up at the top. If you look in the yellow first, it says, hey, you know what? Vault is performing an FFA validation with an upstream service. You should receive a push notification. However, sort of a problem in that, since we were doing the demo here, we didn't actually connect any MFA devices. So the error from Vault is saying, hey, you know what? You actually need to enroll an authentication device, and then it gives you, a URL here that you can go and do that. So let's go do that, and then we'll after we do that, we'll come back and we'll rerun that command. So I'm just going to open a new tab. I'm going to paste that URL in, And this basically gives us a workflow of, hey, onboarding a new device. So I'm going to click Start Setup. I've already downloaded the Duo app on my phone, so I'm not going to need to install that. Also, I'm not going to install any, additional security onto the device, so I'm just going to skip that for now. I have a tablet. I'm going to continue. I'm using iOS. You can see it's pretty cool. It gives you a bunch of different options depending on the platform. So, you have lots of coverage. Says, hey, you need to install the app on your phone. I've already done that. I'll show you what that looks like in a second. So I'll just say, hey, I've done that. What happens next here is we're given a QR code. So I'm going to switch in a second over to my phone and I'll show you what that looks like. But, basically you scan the QR code with your camera and that links up, our Vault instance that's connected to Duo with our phone. So it says, hey, you know what, this phone is an approved authentication device. So let's switch over to my phone. So I have the App Store. This is the app I downloaded, Duo Mobile. And then I'll switch over to the app. I'll just click Continue. This is a fresh install, so you can see, hey, there's no sort of entries yet. So we're going to add our first entry. Click. Then I'm going to scan that QR code. And I'll point it up at the QR code here. Yep, HashiCorp came up, so it recognizes it. We're establishing that link. I'm going to save this. Great. So at this point, we've added that HashiCorp account, which basically says, hey, next time we run that command, it's going to send a push notification to the Duo client, and then we can approve or deny it. So let me switch back to the console or the browser here. Yep, we're good. That's checked off. We'll click Continue. I think we're good, right? Yep. Okay. So on the phone, we've done this. So sorry, my machine's a little bit lagging today. Yep. Done that. Finish. Cool. Enrollment's done. So let's switch back to the console now and reissue that command. So the first time it failed, saying, hey, you know what, we don't have a device enrolled, which is actually a good error because, hey, how do we enroll a device? So let's rerun that command and see what happens. I think we're good. We'll run that. Perfect. So this time, hey, we're actually prompted and we didn't get an error message. So I'm going to try to quickly switch over to my phone here. I'll open up the app. Good. We'll see if we get the notification. Perfect. I'm going to hit approve. And then, so you can see that, once we hit approve, then, we were able to log in as that user. So that's pretty much it for the demo. This is obviously a proof of concept, but this shows you how to onboard it. What's cool about this is Vault actually has a capability of using this MFA in a bunch of different ways. Right now, we obviously just protected users logging in or something like that. But you also, through Vault's policy engine, you can actually say when a user reads a particular secret or tries to do a particular action, you can fire off this MFA integration, which is super cool. So you might not want to use, MFA when they log in, but you want to have it triggered as soon as they, try to do a particular interaction or something like that. So there's a lot of flexibility in, how you want to implement it. I think we're good. There is one more thing I wanted to mention here. Was if I go back to the browser, sorry here, if you go to the learn-hashicorp.com website, this is learn.hashicorp.com is sort of like a goldmine of any tutorials that if you have some use case that you want to use Vault with, you can basically type it in here and you'll find it. So all from just general secrets management to advanced database encryption or database credential rotation or something like that. Also, we have a couple cool guides on MFA. So if you go up to the search bar up here, you type MFA, there's two really good guides. These are basically hands-on labs that you can run through that basically walk you through the exact same sort of workflow or demo that I did today. Awesome, thanks very much. So I'll stop sharing and then I think we'll go back to Q&A. If you don't mind throwing up the resource slide, I'll just maybe chat about that for a second too.
Yep.
Yeah, so awesome. Thanks very much. So, obviously we chatted about HCP Vault. If you want to try that, just check out cloud.hashicorp.com. But all the stuff I showed you today works across open source, enterprise, or HCP Vault. If you sign up for HCP Vault, you'll get credits and you can basically run Vault for a month. So it's more than enough to play around with all the sort of normal use cases. Also check out Duo. You can set up the whole thing for, in a few minutes. You get a 3-day trial there. Also, you can check out the Trusted Access report. So I think right now we'll jump over to the questions. And if you have any questions, just pop them in the QA box there.
Thanks so much, Justin, for an awesome demo there. We do already have a few questions that have come in. There's a few from Dana, which I'm going to pose live. How does the Vault MFA picture look like for an organization that already leverages an identity management platform like Keycloak for MFA? For example, Keycloak enforces MFAs, so does Vault also layer that on, or will the operator decide to bypass this feature of Vault? Who would like to respond to that? Talha or Wolfgang?
Justin, you want to take that one or want me to?
Yeah, I can take a crack at it. I think, obviously, Vault has a flexibility to sort of work with your environment. So yeah, I'd say that, I don't know, it's not like we're going to force you down a particular path. So I'd say how your team wants to implement it is probably how we'd go about it. If you already have, MFA and single sign-on, maybe a second one is redundant, or maybe you have critical credentials or certain functions within Vault that you want to sort of have another layer. Basically using policies, you can do that. So I know it's sort of open-ended answer, but I think it really depends. There's not a blanket solution for everyone, but yeah. So that's my answer.
Yeah, I think just to piggyback on that, I mentioned in my Vault diagram, like we have this concept of what we call the auth backend, and it's up to our customers. It's pluggable. It's open. If you had an IDP and you want something like I don't know, Okta or Keycloak or some AWS identity backend to do something for you, Vault allows you to do that. Do you want to extend that across all of your applications? That is up to you. So Vault is pretty flexible from auth backends, secret backends, auditing backends, and you can bring in whatever tech of choice you have in your environment. And that's the beauty of open source that we enable across the ecosystem.
Thanks so much, Talha and Justin. Just another question from Dana, and it may require some more background info, and we can always take this, there's the response offline should we need to. How is the TLS SL listener provisioned in HCP Vault? Is it using a trusted certificate authority?
Yeah, I think I asked a counter question for clarification, but I'll take an attempt to what I understand. So if you're talking about HCP Vault, our managed Vault, our managed Vault is available as a managed offering. It's providing an interface through your normal web APIs of sorts. So if you're authenticating using our web APIs, we use a bunch of root CAs, Amazon ACM being one of them. For some of our services, we also use Let's Encrypt. So that's our root CA that we are using. We are not a root CA ourselves. We rely on one of the top certificate authorities in the world to sign the downward chain back for us. That's the answer on the external interface front. On the internal side, once you deploy Vault, you can generate and manage your own CA or PKI chain, what have you. And different customers use different things. Like you could have a root CA, you could bring in your own CA, you could make Vault sign and generate intermediary certs. So that PKI chain is up to you, how you want to manage in your environment.
Great, thanks so much, Talha. We do have one last question from Madhu. What is the extra feature with Cisco Duo compared to other Duo mechanisms? Wolfgang, can you take that one?
Sure, of course. So Duo security provides multi-factor, provides device health and device identity, provides policy enforcement. I think those are the main ones. If we start thinking about the rest of the Cisco secure ecosystem, we've got integrations with AMP, for example. I mentioned making sure that a secure access workstation or privileged access workstation wasn't infected. That would be, through an integration with a product like AMP.
Thanks, Wolfgang. And just 2 additional questions might be helpful for our audience to know. What are the ways to ensure only the admin workstations can access the secrets? I think that might be you, Wolfgang.
So from a Duo perspective, you can do device identity as by agent or by certificate. So you would mark those devices as trusted. You'd have them authenticate in along the way when you're doing the multi-factor authentication.
Thank you, Wolfgang. I think the final question is for Justin. In the demo you shared, we see a phone with Duo Push as an authenticator. Are other options supported? If so, what would you suggest are the best or strongest authentication options? Justin?
Sorry, can you repeat the question there?
Yeah, in the demo you shared, we see a phone with Duo Push as an authenticator. Are other options supported? If so, what would you suggest are the best or strongest authentication options? Yeah,
on the maybe Wolfgang, you can follow up, but like in my experience when I was looking at the interface, they have a tab called 2FA devices. Phone seems to be one of them. Text, I think also like hardware devices like YubiKey or something like that. I think I covered them, but maybe there's other ones. Maybe you want to follow up.
Yeah, and you'd want to use the most secure method possible. So certainly you could do phone or text, but it would be more ideal if you're using a hardware key or push.
Thank you again, Justin and Wolfgang. We are coming up to the top of the hour and we have run out of time. Thank you so much, Talha, Wolfgang, and Justin for a very insightful session. And thank you to the audience. There are some great questions there. I hope everyone enjoyed today's webinar, has a better understanding of Vault multi-factor authentication with Cisco Duo. And finally, as mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, this webinar was recorded and we will make the recording available after processing. I'll send an email to everyone who registered with the recording link. Have a great day. Goodbye, everyone.